Good evening. This is 7 o'clock news bulletin coming to you live from this news center of the Sultanate of Oman television. First, the headlines. His Majesty Sultan Haytham bin Tariq receives the credentials of a number of ambassadors accredited to the Sultanate of Oman. Oman Power and Water Procurement Company is to award a tender to develop the projects of Manah 1 and Manah 2 solar energy plants in the upcoming year. At the 20th annual meeting of the International Society for Pharmacovigilance reviews side effects of drugs in Muscat. Thank you for joining us. Those were the headlines, and now the news in detail. His Majesty Sultan Haytham bin Tariq received separately credentials of a number of their excellencies, ambassadors of brotherly and friendly countries accredited to the Sultanate of Oman at Al Alam Palace this morning. His Majesty has received credentials of Her Excellency Stella Kluth, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of His Majesty King William Alexander of Netherlands, accredited to the Sultanate of Oman. His Excellency Shayful Anwar Mohammed, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of His Majesty Sultan Abdullah bin Sultan Ahmed Shah, King of Malaysia, accredited to the Sultanate of Oman. His Majesty also has received the credential of Her Excellency Veronique Aulognon, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of His Excellency Emmanuel Macron, President of France, accredited to the Sultanate of Oman. Then His Majesty received the credentials of His Excellency Williams Morris, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, Queen of the Great Britain, Northern Ireland, and Head of the Commonwealth accredited to the Sultanate of Oman. His Majesty the Sultan received the credentials of His Excellency Khalid Mohammed Abdul Halim, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of His Excellency Abdul Fattah al-Sisi, President of the Arab Republic of Egypt, accredited to the Sultanate of Oman. His Majesty received the credentials of His Excellency Qais Saad Al-Amri, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of His Excellency Dr. Barham Saleh, President of Republic of Iraq, accredited to the Sultanate of Oman. His Majesty the Sultan received the credentials of Her Excellency Ligia Maria Scherer, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of His Excellency Jair Bolsonaro, President of the Federal Republic of Brazil, accredited to the Sultanate of Oman. And His Majesty received the credentials of His Excellency Amit Narang, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of His Excellency Ram Nath Kovind, the President of the Republic of India, accredited to the Sultanate of Oman. During side meetings with His Majesty the Sultan, Their Excellencies the ambassadors conveyed greetings of the leaders of their countries along with their wishes for good health, happiness and long life to His Majesty the Sultan and the for Omani people, further progress and prosperity under the wise leadership of His Majesty, expressing their honor and great happiness to present their credentials before His Majesty. Their Excellencies the ambassadors affirmed that they would do their utmost to advance their country's relations with the Sultanate of Oman in various fields to serve the common interest of the Omani people and the peoples of their countries. His Majesty the Sultan welcomed the ambassadors, thanking their leaders of their greetings and good wishes and assuring them that they would receive all support from His Majesty, the government and the Omani people to facilitate their performance of their duties. The ceremony was attended by His Excellency the Minister of the Diwan of the Royal Court, His Excellency the Foreign Minister, Commander of the Royal Guard of Oman, His Excellency the Head of the Royal Protocols and the military ACDs of His Majesty the Sultan. His Majesty Sultan Haytham bin Tariq sent a cabal of greetings to His Majesty Norodom Sihamoni, King of Cambodia, on his country's National Day. The Shura Council at its second session for the third round of the 9th term reviewed the work plans and discussions request for a number of Their Excellencies ministers. The meeting discussed also a report on the challenges and incentives requested for small and medium-sized enterprises. The meeting was chaired by His Excellency Khalid bin Hilal Al Mawali, Chairman of the Shura Council. The National Competitiveness Committee discussed a number of topics on its agenda, mostly notably the Global Competitiveness Report and the World Federation of Competitiveness Councils. The meeting also reviewed the guide of the National Competitiveness Office on the mechanisms of the office's work in integrations with the concerned authorities inside and outside the Sultanate of Oman, with the aim of enhancing and raising the degree of the Sultanate of Oman's competitiveness in international indicators and reports by suggesting improvement mechanisms and following up on their implementation and identifying guidelines for dealing with the international reports and indicators issued by the international organizations. The meeting was chaired by His Excellency Dr. Saeed bin Mohammed Al Sukhri, Minister of Economy. The Oman Power and Water Procurement Company is preparing to award a tender to develop the projects of Manah 1 and Manah 2 solar energy plants in the upcoming year. It is expected that the cost of the development will reach around 300 million Omani riyals. The commercial activation of the project is expected to start by the last quarter of 2024. The company will choose international developers for the project. They come within the energy sector projects, which is considered one of the economic diversification enhancement sectors, in addition to being a contributor in investments in Oman programs so as to achieve Oman Vision 2040. The implementation of this project comes within the government's approach to use renewable energy so as to cover the increased demand on electricity in the Sultanate of Oman. This project, along with other energy sector projects, will contribute in reaching a consumption of 20% of the total renewable energy by 2030. The production capacity of the project is estimated at 1,000 megawatt. You are with the Sultanate of Oman Television, and yet to come in our news bulletin. The book entitled Masira Island Old History is considered as one of the newest publications that narrates the history of the island.
وارتقيها ما السماء واملأ الكون
Welcome back to the news from the Sultanate of Oman television. The works of the 20th annual meeting of the International Society for Pharmacovigilance, hosted by the Sultanate of Oman, represented by the Minister of Health in the General Directorate of Pharmacy and Drug Control, began today. The meeting was held under the auspices of His Excellency Dr. Ahmed Al-Saidi, Minister of Health.
The meeting, which lasts for 3 days, aims to identify the latest developments related to the adverse effects of medicines, monitor and analyze them, and find the necessary solutions to avoid them or reduce their severity.
The main purpose of this meeting is to share information and knowledge between experts from different countries. The participation is from so many countries, and the importance of this meeting during particularly this time with COVID-19, which the surveillance of the side effects and complications of medication is extremely important. Since we've mentioned vaccination, there's hesitancy in many countries to take COVID-19 vaccine, and this hesitancy is not scientifically founded. The vaccines are safe and effective.
The opening program included a speech by the Director General of Pharmacy and Drug Control, Dr. Mohammed Al-Rubai, who explained that this meeting is a platform for countries and interested health professionals to discuss current issues and concerns related to pharmacovigilance, especially in light of the pandemic that the world is going through, which required the national regulatory authorities and the national immunization program to implement vaccines vigilance plans in order to monitor the safety and efficacy of existing COVID-19 vaccines in use.
Actually, the International Society of Pharmacovigilance is a global professional, independent, non-for-profit society. And the main aims of this society is to foster science, learning, and research in pharmacovigilance in all countries. There are actually different sessions in this conference. The main topics is to share the experience of post-marketing surveillance of COVID-19 vaccines, and also to discuss the harmonization and integration of safety surveillance systems.
Dr. Mira Harson, chairperson of the International Society for Pharmacovigilance, delivered a speech by video communication in which she reviewed the history of the society, its role and achievements in this regard. The meeting's agenda includes many scientific sessions that discuss many topics, some of which are monitoring global post-marketing safety of COVID-19 vaccines and standardizing safety monitoring among different health product categories.
This is the annual conference of the International Society of Pharmacovigilance. And pharmacovigilance perhaps is not known to everybody, but it's about medicine safety. So we are monitoring everything happening to patients that is to some extent caused by inadequate use of medicines, adverse reactions to medicines, or bad quality medicines. And we are trying to learn from each experience when a patient is having something bad happening to them. We should learn and do it better in the future.
I am very honored to be attending ISOP conference in Oman, Muscat. Looking forward to meaningful conversations, discussions, collaborations, and learning across the different industry and experts, academia, industry, and hospital administration, as well as the regulators. It's an honor and a privilege to be having this forum to discuss patient safety.
Around 300 participants from different world countries are taking part in this meeting, representing international organizations, medicine companies, and monitoring authorities.
The Sultanate of Oman and Morocco signed a memorandum of understanding in the field of historical documentation and the management of documents and manuscripts. The memorandum aims to exchange and copy documents, printing manuscripts, along with exchanging expertise and training employees working in this field. The National Records and Archives Authority seeks through this memorandum to achieve an integrated system of cooperation with the organizations in the local and international levels. Many researchers around the world studied the history of the island of Masira, but a book by Dr. Hamid Al-Ghilani is considered as one of the newest publications that studied the island's history. More details coming up in this report.
Masira Island, or Origana as called by Alexander the Great BC. It is there in the history as the last type of Al-Badan ship stopped here, and it was documented in Masira Old History book.
People in Masira, they're using different type of boats. One of them is the famous one is Al-Badan called, and until 1915 there are more than 15 of these badans used for the communication between the south of the Arabian Peninsula to the north of Arabian Peninsula, especially the harbors in Yemen, which is called Qana or Al-Adan, and the harbors in Dhufar, which is called Samahram or Khorruri now, and the north harbors which in Sur or in Muscat or in Batna area.
Dr. Hamid takes us on a journey in the past through his book that documents evidence of prehistory and traces in around 150 locations in the island of different pre-ages such as Bronze Age, Iron Age, Islamic Age and Middle Ages.
Or the capitals of Masira in the old history is Marses area, Sur Masira area, Ras Abu Sas area. This is the main locations which was with the high population of peoples and activities related to the trading and navigation area.
The book is still taking us to another interesting history of the sailors and the old active marine navigation. The researcher turns pages of some diaries documented by the Greeks, the Romans and the Arabs such as Ibn Battuta, who said, "We have reached Masira Island. It is a big island and its people only eat fish." Sultan bin Saif al-Sarai from South Al-Sharqiyya Governorate, Wilaya of Masira.
After a day of pause, the venue of the United Nations Climate Change Conference, or COP26, reopened today in Glasgow for the second and final week of talks. Among the issues being haggled over by almost 200 countries are a fresh commitment to the goal of capping global warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius, getting countries to review their efforts more frequently to increase the pressure for deeper cuts and financial support for poor nations. Stopping warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius or so can avoid or at least lessen some of the most catastrophic future climate change harms, and for some people is a life or death matter scientists have found in many reports. This is the Sultanate of Oman television. Before we end tonight's bulletin, here are the main points once again. His Majesty Sultan Haytham bin Tariq receives the credentials of a number of ambassadors accredited to the Sultanate of Oman. Oman Power and Water Procurement Company is to award a tender to develop the projects of Manah 1 and Manah 2 solar energy plants in the upcoming year. And the 20th annual meeting of the International Society for Pharmacovigilance reviews side effects of drugs in Muscat. And with that, we do conclude this news bulletin brought to you live from this news center of the Sultanate of Oman television. From me and the entire news team here in the studio and the newsroom, we thank you for joining us. Wish you a pleasant evening and, of course, stay safe and healthy. Good night.